Today I'm going to talk about existentialism, or existentialism, as the French like to say. Just kidding, don't take my word on that, I don't know. In my experience, existentialism is highly misunderstood, and is pretty much on college campuses synonymous with the word deep, as in, like, that's so existential, and I just don't think that's right, you know? So I'm not saying that I'm an expert on existentialism, but I just want to talk about a few things and maybe bring them out into the open. Descartes' famous saying, "I think, therefore I exist," is compatible with existentialism. Existentialists basically believe that existence precedes essence. Existence being that a thing is, and essence being what it is. So the basic idea of existentialism is to accept responsibility for your actions, determine the course of your own life, and do this facing the apparent absurdity of life itself. To existentialists, existence is embodied, meaning basically that existence is defined in part by how we interact with the world, how we interact with the physical world, the direction that our life takes. And in this way, actually, when I was reading about it, it's funny because it reminded me of the latest thing in cognitive science, which is distributed cognition, which is where they study the brain in more realistic context than just isolating specific features of the brain, which is just kind of less realistic, less applicable to the real world. But anyway, another tangent, but I recommend reading about distributed cognition. One problem with existentialism is that if life is meaningless and absurd, then why live? And it seems a little strange to me that one could create one's own truths or one's own meaning in an essentially meaningless world. It seems kind of arbitrary, actually. It seems like deriving something from nothing, which is absurd. I thought about it, and there are definite physical rewards when people do certain things, such as, neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, even oxytocin, whatever. And this makes me wonder why existentialists aren't all hedonists, just in search of the next high. But as an aside, I guess that people could use reason, existentialists could use reason to find a stable source of whatever feel-good neurotransmitters, which means that they would live a more predictable, stable life than being hedonists. So, yeah, what do you think about that? Nietzsche might be able to respond to that, because if I understand him correctly, he thinks that there can be an aesthetic principle that underlies actions, that sort of unifies them in that way, much like one composes a song or one paints a picture. It's really about the aesthetic principle of the thing. You might be wondering, since I have existentialist in my name, whether I am an existentialist, and I would say no, I'm not an existentialist. Not really. In some ways I am, but not enough to call myself one. I've also supported determinism, or more specifically compatibilism, and it's kind of an interesting question whether determinism is compatible with existentialism. And as a compatibilist, I would say yes, it is, because the physical laws of the physical universe don't have anything to do with personal responsibility. That's just what I think. So the last thing I want to point out is that I think it's interesting how existentialism is a philosophy, and it's in some ways telling people how to think, which is to think for themselves, but it's still telling them to think for themselves. I don't know if that's a contradiction, but it's kind of interesting. Anyway, please let me know what you think, and thanks for listening.